Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. We begin with disturbing news about more security loopholes in the Transportation Security Administration. A new report found TSA officials failed to identify 73 workers with links to terrorism. Individuals were cleared for access to secure airport areas despite presenting a potential safety threat. Charlene Aaron has more.
Aviation workers with ties to terrorism working at airports across the country. That's according to a new report by Homeland Security's Inspector General. The report found that 73 aviation workers whose names were listed on the terror watch list and represented a potential transportation security threat were cleared and allowed to work in airports in the U.S. The audit also revealed that the TSA didn't have effective measures in place to keep prospective employees with criminal histories and illegal status from getting a job at airports in the U.S. The people in question were employed by major airlines, airport vendors, and other employers. But the TSA failed to identify any link to terrorism during the vetting process because of gaps in accessing the terrorism watch list database. This problem with a breach in TSA security procedures comes just a week after an internal report found shocking failures in airport security. Undercover federal agents had a 95% success rate at sneaking fake bombs and weapons right past TSA checkpoints.
The terrorists do watch this thing. They do watch and they go to school on how they can learn from possible vulnerabilities.
The agents were able to smuggle items such as mock explosives and weapons through TSA checkpoints in 67 out of 70 attempts.
Anytime there's a high rate of misses, that causes concern.
Meanwhile, the TSA is now coordinating with the Department of Homeland Security to ensure it has access to all necessary terrorism watch list information. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Another U.S. government website has been hacked, this time a military site. Monday afternoon, the site army.mil was attacked by a group claiming to be the Syrian Electronic Army. The U.S. Army quickly took down the site to avoid a data breach. The Fort Bragg Facebook page posted a message advising personnel to avoid using the site. Just last week, the U.S. government's federal personnel database was hacked. The U.S. hasn't said who's responsible for that attack. The security breach is considered the most significant cyber attack in U.S. history. President Obama says the Islamic State continues to make gains despite what he calls, quote, significant progress in the fight against them. This latest announcement came at the G7 summit in Germany today, and the timing of it is nearly a year since American troops started returning to Iraq to help forces deal with the Islamic State. The president called the militants, quote, nimble, aggressive, and opportunistic, but he admitted there is still no strategy to defeat them.
When a finalized plan is presented to me by the Pentagon, then I will share it with the American people. It's not, we don't yet have a complete strategy.
The president also said Iraqi troops who haven't had U.S. assistance are often ill-equipped to fight, and they suffer from low morale. 88 Eritrean Christians from Libya are being held captive by the Islamic State militants. Fox News reports the terror group kidnapped the victims from a people smuggler caravan last week. An international rights activist told Fox the militants demanded the Muslims and Christians identify themselves. That's when many of the Christians were put in a truck and taken to an unknown location. The U.S. Supreme Court struck down a law that would have allowed Americans born in Jerusalem to list Israel as their country of birth on their passports. In a 6-3 ruling Monday, the court said Congress overstepped its bounds when it approved the passport law back in 2002. The ruling ends a 12-year lawsuit by a Jerusalem-born American and his U.S. parents. Under the law, the State Department would have been forced to alter its long-standing policy of not listing Israel as the birthplace for Jerusalem-born Americans. U.S. policy says the city's status should be resolved between the Palestinians and the Israelis. They are longtime adversaries in the most dangerous region in the world, the Middle East. But now, Israel and Saudi Arabia have been meeting behind closed doors, working together secretly against a common enemy, Iran. The two countries spoke publicly in Washington last week about their unprecedented cooperation against the deadly nuclear program in Iran. Chris Mitchell brings us this story now from Jerusalem.
At the Council on Foreign Relations, Israel's incoming Director General of the Foreign Ministry, Dori Gold, met with Anwar Majed Eski, his Saudi Arabian counterpart. These historic enemies sent the same message. Iran is trying to take over the Middle East, and it must be stopped. At the event, Israel and Saudi Arabia revealed they have met 5 times in the last year and a half in secret. That revelation and the rare public meeting seemed designed to send a clear message to President Obama's White House.
The Saudi message is basically President Obama listened to Prime Minister Netanyahu. The Saudis identify fully with the Israeli perception of the Iranian threat. They totally disagree with the very naive misperception of Iran by President Obama.
Iranian press TV even covered the event, and the timing of the meeting seemed planned. It fell in the shadow of the June 30th deadline for the nuclear talks in Lausanne, Switzerland, between Iran, the U.S., and 5 other world powers.
In fact, the Saudis and the Israelis are very, very concerned about President Obama being preoccupied with Lausanne, which conflicts dramatically with the reality in the Persian Gulf. In fact, the Iranians are trying to topple every single pro-American Arab regime.
Former Israeli Ambassador Yoram Ettinger says the threat Iran poses explains the change in relations.
And as far as the Saudis are concerned, Israel constitutes the most effective life insurance, which they have right now in face of Iran.
While Saudi Arabia, a major Sunni power, and Israel have been enemies for decades, they both see Shiite Iran's nuclear program as a threat to their very existence. Huge differences remain between these two historic foes, but for now their alliance seems a classic example of the Middle East maxim, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Drinking water near a hydraulic fracturing or fracking site may not negatively impact your health, according to a government study. An extensive study released Thursday by the Environmental Protection Agency showed fracking did not have a, quote, widespread impact on drinking water. The EPA conducted the study in response to growing concerns about the potential impact to health and the environment, including water supplies. The study did not examine effects on air quality or public health at large. Every week, thousands of California high school students attend Christian clubs where they learn about the Bible and how to follow Christ in their everyday lives. Some find help to overcome addictions, while others receive healing of the scars left behind by abuse and growing up in fatherless homes. The ministry behind all of this is One Voice Student Missions, founded by Barcelona. Barcelona says school administrators and teachers see the difference the clubs are making.
Most campuses have seen a drastic shift in their students. I've had in the past principals tell me, hey, keep doing what, principals that were maybe Buddhists, one was Muslim, keep doing what you're doing because, you know, whatever you're preaching, students are changing, drugs are dropping. In one school we were in, the grades were going up, the SATs. So you can see when there's drastic shifts, when gangs aren't fighting, when kids aren't tagging up to school, when drugs are dropping, it kind of eases more of the pushback to say, well, something positive is coming out of this thing, so we continue to let it go.
And you can see my full interview with Brian Barcelona at our website, cbnnews.com. Coming up, the BDS movement against Israel. Is it designed to eliminate the Jewish state? France is firmly opposed to a boycott of Israel. That is the latest word from the country's foreign minister after a French telecom company cut its business ties with the Jewish state. Despite France's position, there's a growing international movement to boycott Israel, and it includes everyone from activists to rock stars to businesses and even some churches. Chris Mitchell brings us the story from Jerusalem.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says there's an international campaign being waged against this country to blacken its name.
It is not connected to our actions. It is connected to our very existence. It does not matter what we do. It matters what we symbolize and what we are.
Just this week, the CEO of French mobile phone giant Orange said he would cut ties with the Israeli operating company here, one of Israel's largest, as soon as possible. Earlier this week, Britain's National Union of Students voted to boycott Israel and affiliate with the BDS movement. The same group voted against the resolution last year, condemning the terrorist actions of ISIS. This is all part of the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement, or BDS. The goal, punish Israel by encouraging artists, companies, academia, countries, and even churches to boycott its products, divest from its companies, and impose sanctions on the Jewish state. They claim that this will help end what they call injustice against Palestinians. Critics believe BDS aims to do much more. BDS expert Iran Shaishon says the clear agenda is to tarnish Israel's reputation.
What the BDS is trying to do is to create an anti-Israeli spirit of the times, namely to negatively brand Israel, so to associate it with the former regime of South Africa. Clearly such equation is false.
Will Roth is an Austrian-born Jew and CEO of the Israel-Europe Freedom Center. He says this campaign has gone beyond words.
When you go to certain areas, unfortunately, especially in Belgium and in Sweden, if you just have a yarmulke, not to say have some good word about Israel, there will be slurs upon slurs, and usually they will be violent at the end.
But while BDS is sweeping Europe, it is slower to take hold in the U.S. Ross says that's in part because Europeans become intoxicated by ideas, while Americans tend to fight back. The Presbyterian Church USA ended business connections with companies dealing with Israel. And the U.S. State Department boycotts cutting-edge cancer research at the Israeli Ariel University because it's in Samaria, also called the West Bank. Pink Floyd's Roger Waters openly criticizes artists who perform in Israel. But some, like Eric Clapton, Dionne Warwick, and Alan Parsons, performed in Israel anyway. American actress Scarlett Johansson faced protests due to her endorsement of SodaStream, an Israeli company with Jewish and Arab workers based in an Israeli settlement. According to Shaishon, Israel fights an uphill battle because the other side plays by different rules.
While we try to explain our position and use facts, they do branding. And this is a completely different field. When they shoot from Gaza, we said, well, they started and they showed apartheid. There's a mismatch between the strategies and the responses, and that's our problem. We don't understand the battle.
And in this battle, Roth says, American Christians are among the biggest Israel supporters. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Up next, the question plaguing churches across America. Can you love the sinner but hate the sin when it comes to homosexuality? Hear how Christians are trying to answer that question after this. Actor Patrick Stewart is supporting the free speech rights of Christian bakers who declined to decorate a cake with a pro-gay marriage message. An Irish court fined the owners of Asher's Bakery £500 for not writing the slogan "Support Gay Marriage" on a cake. Stewart told a BBC News program that no one should be forced to write things they disagree with. Gay activists are attacking Stewart for his comments. He says he supports same-sex marriage, but freedom of speech is also a fundamental right. In a Facebook post, Stewart says, "In my view, this particular matter was not about discrimination, but rather personal freedoms and what constitutes them, including the freedom to object." The island of Guam has become the first U.S. territory to recognize gay marriage. At least 3 same-sex couples lined up early for marriage licenses. A U.S. district judge struck down Guam's law against same-sex marriage Friday after a lawsuit from a lesbian couple. Guam is an island about 3,800 miles west of Hawaii. Its residents are U.S. citizens. The developments in Guam come as the U.S. Supreme Court prepares to issue a decision on same-sex marriage later this month. Well, as the nation waits for the decision on the future of marriage in America, many churches are also examining an important question. How do they minister to people who are attracted to others of the same sex? Heather Sells takes a look at this difficult issue.
I was afraid to tell anybody because in the Christian circles, I had heard people say those people are sick, and I was a little girl struggling with those feelings.
Cynthia Austin attended church with her family and accepted Christ as a young girl, never imagining she'd experience same-sex attraction. It started in the 6th grade.
It was very confusing when these feelings started happening, and I was like, wait a minute. I love the Lord. This shouldn't be happening.
Across the country, church leaders are waking up to the reality that millions struggle with feelings like Austin's. This awakening has many asking for help and is why Southern Baptists have just spent $250,000 to train leaders in sexual ethics.
Many pastors agree that working with those who are attracted to the same sex is perhaps the leading cultural issue of our time. And when it comes to ministry, they are looking for fresh approaches.
Pastor Dan Backens leads a large church in Virginia that has wrestled with the challenge for years.
The strategy of the church in 1950 does not work today. We're not in Mayberry. And walking around with placards, screaming on a television program, over-talking on a news interview, those days are gone. We have to have a strategy, a prophetic strategy as a church that listens, and we lead with love and then follow with the law.
Southern Baptist leader Dr. Russell Moore says he's glad pastors want help in dealing with this issue.
If a church isn't asking those questions, it simply means that church is not on mission in its community.
Moore says a good starting point is to not segregate those dealing with sexual sin or look down on their struggle.
If we act as though there are some sins that are especially repulsive or some sins that are especially outside the reach of Christ, even just implicitly, that's really a message of human pride. That's asserting it didn't take as much gospel to save me as it would take to save you. And that's not just wrong-headed, that's blasphemy.
Charmin Bradshaw would know. 10 years ago, her son wrote a letter telling her that he was gay. In addition to working through her own grief, she felt shamed at times by fellow believers.
You know, sin is sin. God doesn't see it different. But somehow there is the feeling that this is like the worst, the most awful.
Bradshaw now leads a support group for parents of gay children. It's part of a growing recognition that the body of Christ can help those struggling and their families. For Cynthia Austin, the church eventually became her lifeline.
What I found with the church is safe people within the church, a community within the church.
She says her small group members shared their struggles and showed respect for hers.
They loved me with the truth of God. They didn't water down truth. They loved me and just kept saying, there's a better way. There's a better way.
Creating hope and a vision for that better way is key, says Moore. For many gays, there's no guarantee that their sexual feelings will go away. So the question becomes how to pursue Christ in the midst of their battle.
I think the most important question that any of us have to answer in our churches is what vision of the future are we giving to that gay or lesbian or transgender person who comes into the church who says, I really want to live in submission to Jesus. I really want to repent of sin. But what does it look like for me to follow Jesus?
Church leaders must also face questions such as, what does it mean to respect those who identify as gay or are same-sex attracted? Can they teach or become church leaders? And what about those already in gay marriages? Backens begins with a simple answer: do well in loving them.
God isn't just interested in what's right or wrong. God is interested in, are we presenting right or wrong in a loving way?
That way has made all the difference for Austin, and church leaders hope it will for many others with similar journeys.
I am not the same person. I cannot explain the difference. My anger, my rage, it is like night and day. My identity is not in who I am with and who I love here. My identity is in Jesus Christ. My identity is what He has done for me.
Heather Sells, CBN News.
CBN is using digital media to evangelize a growing audience. Vida Dura is a Spanish-language TV show ministering to people from all walks of life. Vida Dura Live is now online to meet the growing demand of its TV audience. The interactive webcast provides viewers with the opportunity to ask questions and to seek practical advice directly from the hosts. CBN works with call center offices from 5 countries to handle viewers' calls. To date, CBN has produced 8 episodes of Vida Dura Live. You can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging on to cbn.com/international. And finally this hour, a positive message you can post, tag, and share with your friends and followers. We call it your Tuesday Tweetable. Do not be troubled by your circumstances. Expect great things, knowing that a change in your attitude can change the situation. One songwriter recently said, "You gotta see it before you see it." And with that, make this a terrific Tuesday. God has great plans for this day. And that is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.